Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle Tech Talk series. Today, we'll be showcasing one of the NG Firewall applications, our OpenVPN app. My name is Shannon Bonfiglio. I'm part of the marketing team here at Untangle, and I'll be your host today. I have also with us that's going to present is Chad McNaughton. He's one of our sales engineers, so he will be taking us through the presentation and also giving us a very in-depth demonstration to show what OpenVPN can do for you. So let's see, next slide. Just a few housekeeping rules before I pass it over to Chad. We have a few options here for you to listen to us. If you do select to use a phone, you will need to dial in and use the access code provided. And as always, you can always use your computer audio. If you do have some issues using the computer audio, it may be your internet connection, so just be sure you have a strong internet connection. As always, we have a few staff members on hand to help answer questions on the back end. So please just be sure to answer those questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. If we don't get to your question, or if you have a very specific question in regards to your network deployment, please email us at support@untangle.com or sales@untangle.com. And also want to reiterate, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch and revisit or share this webinar recording with anyone you wish. It goes up on our Untangle YouTube channel within 24 hours after this has ended. Now, before I pass it over to Chad, I want to iterate, this is a very technical webinar. So if you're new to Untangle or new to networking concepts, then this probably is not the best webinar for you, because we're going to get really deep into the app and the products. So I would suggest we do have a higher level webinar series called 101 webinars that cover more higher level topics for those people that aren't ready to dig into the apps. So you can check out all those webinars on our website, and I think that's it. So go ahead, Chad, take it over.
All right, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, everybody, as Shannon said, first of all, thanks for joining us. Second of all, this is a Tech Talk series webinar. So while we are going to dive deep, the good news is this is OpenVPN. This is Untangle's version of it, but OpenVPN is open source, free VPN. It's something a lot of us are used to already. So what we'll basically walk through is the Untangle flavor of OpenVPN. So what is OpenVPN? You know, the most common VPN scenario, obviously, here, you see my little mobile user, AKA a road warrior, down at the bottom of this graphic. That's the person that will get an OpenVPN client on their laptop. For site B there, site A on the left, you see they have a site-to-site VPN tunnel between them, which we could do a number of ways. Maybe they're using IPsec, maybe that's a split tunnel. Maybe we're doing tunnel VPN or OpenVPN. We have a lot of different ways to create VPN tunnels. What we're going to focus on is OpenVPN and some of its different functionality. So this is a very, very common layout right here, especially in my experience with small businesses. Just a quick breakdown. OpenVPN is open source. This is a very standard, tried and true, stable VPN protocol that you can just go get. You'll get event logs for VPN logouts, login events, things like that on Untangle. And if you're familiar with Untangle, you know that our reporting is as good as it gets. So we can show some general stats on VPN usage, but with our new version, with our new OpenVPN module, we can also provide username and password authentication for VPN users. So even someone, for example, whose office is in the United States, if they're working remotely from France, will install OpenVPN on their laptop. Ideally, Untangle will be their OpenVPN server, and that's what they'll connect through. So if we need to, we can implement basically two-factor authentication. So they'll have the OpenVPN certificate as the first factor, and then we'll be able to leverage username password authentication for their second factor. We can do that in a number of ways, which we'll talk about here in just a few slides. So basic setup and configuration of OpenVPN. It's going to enable you to create an SSL-based VPN that supports both site-to-site and client-to-site tunnels. VPN is obviously a virtual private network. If you're in a tech talk with Untangle, I think you probably know that. So Untangle's OpenVPN is obviously open source and very customizable. The baseline, quick things you can do, it does support any operating system with an OpenVPN compatible VPN client. That's almost every OS there is, including smartphones. But a quick tip, if you're using something like Mac OS, like I am right now, or Linux, or any mobile OS, they're likely going to require a third-party OpenVPN client, like TunnelBlick, which is what we use on our Mac laptops and desktops here. TunnelBlick is free. You can find that online and download it for your Mac. And basically, all you do is throw your OpenVPN config file into TunnelBlick, and boom, you have a way to connect. Most OSs outside of Mac and Linux have that built in natively. So the OpenVPN app can run as a server, which we'll show you, allowing remote clients to connect to the Untangle server, which is handy because that person who's in France is going to VPN into Untangle, which is then going to filter them however strictly you need them to be filtered. We can shape their traffic, see usernames, all that stuff. They're basically just another user once they've remoted into Untangle. It can also connect to other remote Untangle servers as a client, which we'll go through a little bit in the demonstration as well. So on the OpenVPN options, you'll see 4 tabs: status, server, client, and advanced. The status tab is basically quick status. As we were seeing on that previous slide, we'll see any logged on clients. We'll see the actual server name. In fact, if I just go back here, you'll see that I have one remote server called Randy VPN, and I have one connected remote client. So that's the actual status pane right there to just show you who's logged on and the server status that they're logged onto. So once you go over to the server tab, this is going to include all configuration options for the OpenVPN server functionality. If server enabled is checked, the OpenVPN server is going to run and accept connections from those configured remote clients. Site name is the name of this OpenVPN site. So if you want it to be Untangle VPN or Headquarters VPN, that's just a name you give it. The address space is going to define the IP network, the space for the VPN to use internally. A quick tip, this has to be a unique subnet that is not defined anywhere else on the Untangle server. NATing OpenVPN traffic, that checkbox you see there below, will NAT all traffic from remote networks to local networks to a local address. The site URL field is going to show the URL that remote clients will actually use to connect to this server. You can see my server URL right there is the IP : the port. So that's a pretty simple thing. That's what they're technically connecting to as an OpenVPN server. And then below that, you see the user password authentication box. And I'll show you this in action on the demo server. But this is where you can enable two-factor authentication with a login. So this can utilize Untangle's local directory, as well as all the other options in our directory connector module, if that's something you have access to. That would let you use Active Directory, Radius, or OAuth, which would give you logins from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, etc. Creating a client in OpenVPN on Untangle is pretty simple, and I'll show you how we do this live. But the server tab is going to show all the configuration options for the server functionality. That's where we go create a client. So client name is the description of this client. Obviously, we're just going to go say new VPN client. We're going to say Chad's VPN. We can use a username if you want to do jsmith2 VPN, that kind of thing. The group field is going to define which configuration set is assigned to the client. There's a default group built in. If you create new groups, there's a drop down there. The type field defines what kind of client this is going to be. So as you see in my graphic, individual client is just for a single remote user connection. So that person with their laptop in another country will just sign in through their individual client login screen there from OpenVPN. If we chose network, that would actually be for site-to-site VPN. So that's a completely different way of using OpenVPN, obviously. The most common way, to me in my experience, is the first option, the individual client. We're talking quote unquote road warriors, people who work on the road, in the field, things like that, and they need access to your network for one, but also, and becoming as important, these remote users can be filtered by your Untangle when they remote in through VPN. So it's just like they're on the local network. You can push them through any policy based on their interface, their username, if they're authenticating, things like that. As I mentioned, I will walk through this a little bit, but Untangle's OpenVPN does offer two-factor authentication now. I vaguely mentioned that the first factor of this authentication is just the VPN certificate that's part of their remote client. So in Untangle versions past, we would have that first factor at least, and if we had to, we could always create a portal page or a local directory login, that kind of thing. It was a bit of a workaround, but now OpenVPN just has a checkbox. So you just go enable username, password authentication, and as you can see, this is going to require existing configuration files to be downloaded again. So if you go change this, you have to redeploy your client. That will happen occasionally. If you're on an older version of Untangle, for example, and you upgrade to version or two newer Untangle versions, you'll most likely also have to redeploy OpenVPN clients. A couple of versions ago, version 12, we actually went to new encryption modes with OpenVPN because the older deployment actually offered encryption that was not PCI compliant with audits. So if you're on an older version of Untangle, version 12 or so before that, for one, I always recommend getting upgraded to our new version that never has a cost associated with it. We're on version 14 now, for the record, because we do have all these new options for things like authentication and then also just basic new encryption that will help you ease any pains with PCI compliance, things like that. The second factor in two-factor authentication for OpenVPN is an additional password. So obviously, we're going to pull this from wherever we can. You see in the option on my screen, we're pulling from Active Directory. This is coming from the Directory Connector module on Untangle. So if you don't have that paid module, you won't see those three options. You'll only see local directory. This is also a really, really useful thing on Untangle that I don't feel a lot of customers utilize when they need it. Small environments will most likely never have an Active Directory server, a domain controller. Untangle deals with extremely small environments sometimes. We're talking 2, 3, 4 employees. They'll never have a domain controller or even a radius server maybe. So they could set up the local directory on Untangle. So you could just create usernames. That's where you say, this is Jerry Smith, he's jsmith2, this is his password. You can set those to expire or never expire. So keep that in mind. If you do have a really small environment, you don't leverage authentication with something like a radius or Active Directory server, you can always use Untangle's local directory just to get that second factor of authentication for those remote workers. So as you can see, the options are Active Directory, radius, local directory, or any. I'll show you that option on our demo server in Directory Connector. That's basically going to leverage any kind of authentication that Directory Connector sees. On the OpenVPN client tab, you'll be able to configure which remote servers this OpenVPN will connect to as a client. So you can see there in my graphic, we're going to log into the Randy VPN server because that's the one that we're using. The remote servers grid there will show the currently configured remote servers that OpenVPN can connect to. Once you're connected to a remote server, you'll be able to reach those exported networks that we talked about. So that's where you give them permission to which part of your network they need access to. So initially, there are no clients that are allowed to connect, and a unique entry must be created for each remote client that you want to allow to connect to this server. I'm going to walk through that on our demo server here when we get to it, but this is obviously very important. You'll have to create a client, and I'll show you this on the server, but there's a very important step before you download it. You have to create the client, then save it, then download it. Then you can email that client to a worker who basically double clicks it and it installs into their native OS VPN client or TunnelBlink, something like that. A quick note here on my graph, site-to-site connections are never full tunnel, even if you select that in the group for site-to-site. Internet traffic on the remote side of OpenVPN is always going to exit through its local gateway, so this is going to be split tunnel. A quick tip, if IPsec VPN is also installed, you need to make sure that there aren't any tunnels that overlap between these two VPN apps. That will obviously break some things. We do have a lot of really interesting options for VPN tunnels now, whether it's OpenVPN or TunnelVPN, which are both free, or IPsec, which is one of our paid modules. There are a few caveats like that if you run a lot of them. So if you were trying to stand up site-to-site tunnels between two of your remote sites, and you're not sure which option to use, that's a really great time to email us at support@untangle.com or presales@untangle.com if you're still trialing our software. And then we can take a look and give you some recommendations. Maybe IPsec is the best answer, but maybe it's not. Maybe OpenVPN split tunnel will do what you need, and that's a significantly lower cost sometimes. Maybe you already have it. So if you're not sure which VPN option is the best for your scenario, just give us a shout, support@untangle.com or presales@untangle.com, and then we can walk you through that and get the right option chosen. So you'll see a lot of big red warnings here on this slide, and that's with good cause, because this is the advanced tab for OpenVPN, which was basically opened up to anything your heart desires as far as this configuration. A version or two ago, we went through a development cycle that saw OpenVPN changed drastically. And this is the result of that. For the most part, the advanced tab will let you go through just about any configuration scenario you want. As you can see, this is for advanced users who have an extremely detailed knowledge and understanding of OpenVPN already. If you're not really experienced with OpenVPN, you will break things here. So if there's something that's not working in your OpenVPN configuration, you think we need to go in and get kind of drastic, by all means, let us know. You can, again, contact support@untangle.com. There's also an extremely active OpenVPN thread on our forums at forums.untangle.com. OpenVPN is open source and free. So there's a ton of documentation on our wiki, on our knowledge base. Our forums are a great resource for OpenVPN tips and tricks, because this is a very standard, stable VPN protocol that people use around the world and have for a long time. So our forums are a great place for tips and tricks. As far as this slide goes, I can't recommend anyone really jumping into this unless, like I said, you're extremely experienced with OpenVPN and you have a very specific use case. So this is intended for advanced users. If there's an unusual situation that OpenVPN by default isn't getting you connected, just let us know. Maybe we do need to make some changes. But if we do change things here, you can see in the big red warnings on the actual UI there, changes made on this tab are not officially supported by Untangle here. So if you are having trouble getting OpenVPN to work, you're not seeing connections come through, the tunnels aren't up, come to us first, come to the forums first. There may be some quick, easy things. Maybe OpenVPN isn't the right solution, like I said. So don't go willy-nilly onto the advanced tab and start trying to change things to make something work. You will make less things work. So those warnings are there for a reason. As I said, this can compromise things. It's very easy to create vulnerabilities right here if you don't understand what you're doing. You're making fundamental changes to the way VPN operates on your server, and that can make some holes that are hard to go back and plug. So just let us know if you're not getting the results that you want. Reach out to us. You know, as the long story short, the giant graphic right there, be careful on this advanced tab. If there is a specific use case, obviously this is going to help you, and we can do some really crazy things here and make OpenVPN basically bend to our will. But like I said, changes you make here can compromise the security of your server. So just be careful. Let us know if you have any questions on it. I did want to touch real quick on OpenVPN's reporting. The reports tab is going to provide a view of all the reports and events for any connection handled by OpenVPN. So like all of our apps, OpenVPN's reports can be accessed via the dashboard, the reports viewer, or through the app itself on the little view reports link. Any predefined report is going to be listed along with any custom reports that you've created or customized and saved. And reports can obviously be searched and further defined using these selectors and conditions that you're seeing here. Our new version 14, has some really nice updates to our reporting. You can add global conditions on the dashboard now, global conditions on a report. If you want to see this statistic event and add a username condition, that's an easy thing to do now. You can see the client name right there on mine was my MacBook. I was logged on from my MacBook Pro, so Chad MVP is the actual, basically host name, client name that I'm seeing. So I didn't have authentication. So it's going to be real easy to see who's who. If you're doing username authentication, you'll see a username right there. But you can see that, as with all of Untangle's reporting, this could be completely customized. We can make new reports. We can customize the ones that are there. If you're not seeing the data that you're looking for, don't get frustrated. Reach out to us, reach out to the forums. will either walk you through creating a report, customizing the one you're looking for, or helping you find the one that pre-exists. So let's take a quick jump out of the slide deck, and I'm going to come over to this live server here that I've got online. This is not our demo server, by the way. This is a virtual machine here on at my office. So in OpenVPN, you can see I've got it enabled. The server tab, nothing's enabled yet. So we're going to kind of walk through a quick process here. So I don't have any clients. You see no one's connected here, and I also have no remote servers. So there's really nothing going on. I haven't done anything to this OpenVPN yet. It's just kind of sitting here. So if I come over to the server tab, as we were looking at, this is where we say server enabled. So if I wanted to change the name of it, I could here. The address space there, as we talked about, you just punch it in. And then if we need actual authentication, this is the option. So for right now, my site URL is just my host name and the port. The authentication I have, if I need it, is set to a local directory because I'm not currently leveraging anything with directory connector. So I could either go out and connect something through directory connector, but if I don't have that, I could actually configure my local directory from right here. If I say yes, we'll leave this screen. It'll take me right out to Untangle's local directory. And you'll see I have jsmith2 created. He doesn't log in, but he also never expires. So right here, if we need to, we can just come in and give them a username, first and last name, and an email and a password. If you want to set these to expire, you could do that kind of thing. If you, for example, have vendors that require something like an OpenVPN connection to your system for a certain amount of time, we could have those expire if you need to. Not all local directory accounts will be employees, for example. Maybe you have guest accounts there. So those are a good case for letting that actually expire. Then if we go back into OpenVPN here, we'll see I'm going to go ahead and leave authentication turned off on my server because I don't really need it. So I'm on the remote clients tab. So remote clients is where I'm actually going to set up that remote client, for example, the laptop who's overseas. So let's just say this will be mine. No spaces, sorry. I put a space in there and it yelled at me. Default group, I'm going to leave. I don't have any other groups created and I don't need any other groups created. And this is obviously going to be an individual client. What I'm about to do is a very, very crucial step. So you see I've created the client, and your natural instinct is to come over here and download that file so you can shoot it over to your employee. That's not the next step. This is all listed in our documentation, by the way, if you get to it. But what you need to do right now is click save. If I were to download that client, it would yell at me. So I'm going to go ahead and save this remote client. So that's saved, and then I'll just basically download it. This is going to give me some options. So it's preparing the client right now. It's zipping it up. We're going to see options for a Windows exe file. We're going to see a single OpenVPN file with all the certs. For me personally, because I'm using Mac OS, I would want this third option. Untangle OpenVPN clients for other OS, Apple, Linux, etc. So I'm going to choose that one, and it's basically going to download. You'll see my zip file just downloaded. So if I open this up, we'll just see a package in there to open up, and we just go in and open it. So all I would really have to do from now as an end user would be to double click this OpenVPN file, and that would, as you can see, come up in TunnelBlick. I'm a Mac user. A few of us here are. TunnelBlick is a really, really good little free app to get on OpenVPN. It's not on the App Store, so if you just Google TunnelBlick, it'll take you to their site. You'll do a real quick download, and then you're able to get online. So all I would have to do, I would go into OpenVPN, I would double click that, and that would actually open up my TunnelBlick, which will basically look like this. And then I double click that OpenVPN config file, and I've got VPN. So it's not a complicated thing. I did it this way on my Macintosh so I could show you the most complicated way. This is really the hardest it gets because Mac doesn't have that native client. If you're doing this on Windows, you send them the config file, they double click it, Windows VPN gets them in. So it's not complicated. This is the quick way to do a remote client for someone who just needs access from outside your network. We saw as I was creating that my actual exported network is just my default. So over here, by default, your exported network is just going to be the internal primary network. So you see my 192.168 network over there, which is exactly what I needed. I just need to be able to get on the network. If you have multiple networks or spaces that people need access to, we can just go ahead and add those exported networks here. You just give it a name, throw in the space, and then they would have access to that too. So keep that in mind. If they do need access to multiple spaces, that's available. And groups, this is where I chose my default group. If I needed, for example, a different group that was full tunnel, if I wanted to push DNS through this connection and Untangle was the gateway device, not a bridge mode, I could possibly do that. I would just choose the actual OpenVPN server, Untangle, that's handing out DNS. So there are a lot of options right there just on the server tab. So over here on the client tab, this is where we'll see remote servers. So if I wanted to upload my remote server config file, I can do that right here. I don't need to do that. All I'm doing is setting up a client. So if I had to do something like that, if I was going full tunnel, things like that, I would basically set up another network. On the client side, that would come up as an exported network. I would be connected. It would be pretty simple. All you have to do is really upload it. The advanced tab I showed you is, like I said, pretty elaborate. There's nothing on here that I can actually show you in a demonstration, but just know that this is as open-ended as it could possibly be. So if it's a client config or a server config, there are really no limitations now. So keep that in mind that OpenVPN is open source. This is one of our free options. So we're not going to limit you. We were a little hesitant to put this many options in here, but I personally haven't seen a lot of issues with this with users. Anyone who needs something on this screen is usually pretty experienced and they know exactly what they need. As I said, this is really for very, very specific scenarios. So if you have unusual use cases or something like that, we would be able to go in and help you out. But for the most part, you just won't need this tab that much. Another thing that I wanted to mention about OpenVPN, because I hear a little bit of confusion about this just sometimes here in the support office. OpenVPN actually works very well hand in hand with Tunnel VPN. If you need to set up a tunnel to go into a site, a VPN tunnel specifically to push certain traffic up to a different Untangle box, et cetera, to connect site to site, we actually use OpenVPN clients to set up these tunnels. It's an interesting thing, but Tunnel VPN will require an OpenVPN individual client config file. So we have a lot of documentation on that as well, but it is a pretty interesting solution because now with OpenVPN and Tunnel VPN running at remote sites, we can actually set up tunnels to push the traffic from those sites, even specific traffic, up to a centralized Untangle where there's licensing, for example. So little remote sites and remote workers can have a free version of Untangle with a tunnel pushing them through your paid subscriptions. So this is a really cool thing because it's kind of eliminating the need for full licensing, IPsec and all that stuff at tiny little remote sites. So if we needed to do something like that, we would be able to go in and create a client right here, install that in Tunnel VPN, and then basically we can create a tunnel there where those clients can access your network from a remote site. And it's a greatly reduced cost. The site-to-site stuff in OpenVPN is also something that I won't likely go entirely deep into right now. With two Untangles side by side, it's a very simple thing. So we just have to match up the information, make sure the networks match, et cetera, and we connect. As I said before, the biggest gotcha to me is that it's never completely full tunnel. It says full tunnel, but it's not. It's split. So traffic on the other end goes out the internet gateway. So just keep that in mind. If you need full, encrypted tunnels site to site, we would look at IPsec VPN. As I said, OpenVPN is open source and it's free and it does some really, really fun things. But if we're worried about things like enhanced security, we would probably look at IPsec. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're on an older version of Untangle, we probably want to get you updated to a new one anyway if you're using OpenVPN because of that updated encryption that we've employed. I certainly don't want Untangle to be part of a hole in your PCI compliance. That's that's something we go to great pains not to be, obviously. So if you're staying current and you've got auto upgrades on your box, that kind of thing, you should obviously at least be on 13.2. If you're wanting, access to 14, just email us, support@untangle.com with your UID, and we'll throw you on the list. For OpenVPN, that's almost all I've got. Shannon, do we have any questions sitting out there that weren't answered?
Yeah. There is a question about VPN throughput on Untangle appliances. I'm not sure if you know the answer to that.
That's the one I was expecting. All right.
Okay.
That's an impossible question to answer, but it is a good question. So obviously, connecting remotely adds latency, things like that. What's going to increase throughput consumption will be what Untangle is doing once that VPN connection happens. If that person is only coming through the Untangle Firewall app and we don't do a lot of deep packet inspection, the throughput's going to be great. What impacts Untangle throughput? Number one is hardware. If you don't have fast network adapters, the throughput will obviously be affected. Untangle hardware all has gigabit network adapters, so up to a gig shouldn't be an issue. What really impacts throughput, and this is regardless of VPN or anything else, is deep packet inspection. So if we're doing things like decrypting HTTPS and then scanning it with virus blocker and web filter and things like that, that's what affects throughput. We still do really, really well. Untangle runs Linux Debian. So if you have the resources, nothing should really be too affected. To me, it comes down to hardware and deep packet inspection. If those are both configured correctly, I guess, VPN throughput doesn't really have much of a different number than just regular throughput. Obviously, there's a tiny bit of change. It depends on where they are in the world, the ISP, some of that kind of stuff. But with OpenVPN, we have really, really good luck, even with split tunnel.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Someone's asking about IPsec. So if someone uses IPsec to connect from the home, will the traffic be encrypted from their ISP?
Yeah, it's IPsec. That's one of the most stable, secure, encrypted VPNs on Earth. It's been around for 30, 35 years almost. It's a very, very secure VPN. That though would require an IPsec license, right? So if we need to stand that up, we have to have a little device there to create terminated tunnel. So IPsec from someone's house is not entirely common. We could still use OpenVPN. It's still encrypted. VPN by nature is encrypted. So keep that in mind. This is an SSL encrypted tunnel, no matter what kind of VPN you're using here. So it's going to be encrypted. Home users may not have access to an IPsec license is all.
Okay, let's see. Someone is asking, they've enabled Active Directory authentication in OpenVPN, but they want to disable this user to save a password. Is that possible?
Not entirely, because we don't really care about the password. Untangle, licenses by hosts. So when a host is logged in, that's a host that you're licensing. That would be more about your license for Active Directory, I would think. So if you're eliminating usernames from Active Directory, maybe that affects your AD subscription. That wouldn't really affect Untangle too much, I don't think. We could do some things to either block the user or the device, that kind of stuff, if you just don't want them coming through, or if you want them bypassed, not to count on your license, that kind of thing. But I think that would maybe affect AD licensing more than Untangle.
Sorry, let's see, more questions coming in. Let's see. How do you disable client auto connect VPN when they are on a corporate network?
OpenVPN shouldn't really do that automatically unless they've gone into their actual OpenVPN settings on their OS and done that. As far as I know, if they have both, OpenVPN is an option. You have to go in and set that up unless you've got that set to auto start and auto log in at startup. I just wouldn't recommend that if you work in a network where there is IPsec as well, because those tunnels can conflict. So if that's the kind of environment it's in, I certainly wouldn't have OpenVPN set to auto log in like
that. Is the amount of users limited to OpenVPN license?
Nope, OpenVPN is free. There is no license. So if all you have is the Untangle free package, you have access to OpenVPN, Tunnel VPN, and the other free apps. That is absolutely not limited by any licensing. The only limitation will be your hardware or virtual server specifications. So keep that in mind. That's a big difference between IPsec and OpenVPN is licensing. If licensing is your deciding factor, obviously, if you can't spend the money on IPsec, OpenVPN is probably a pretty good solution, and we could do some interesting things with it. But yeah, OpenVPN doesn't have any licensing. You'd just be limited by hardware virtual specs.
Okay, someone's asking about a lot about compliance issues, or for a compliance solution. We are not a PCI or SOX compliance solution. We assist with these compliances through our reporting and the filtering, but we are not a standalone PCI or SOX or whatever compliance solution. Sure. So I just want to make that clear because there seems to be a lot of questions about that.
No, that's a good point. We're a link in that chain. So PCI compliance is a huge term, basically undertaking. Untangle, by default, is configuration. We can help you obviously get PCI compliant. If you are being audited and they mention Untangle or you see any issues, by all means, contact support@untangle.com. If we need to, we could always even look at like one of our professional services to have a support tech go in and completely audit your configuration and update anything, close some ports that might be open, that kind of stuff. So if there's an issue and Untangle has been brought up, I would very much recommend contacting support@untangle.com. Even if you don't have a support license, just send us an email. We can always take a quick look. If we see a quick untied shoelace in your configuration, that kind of stuff, a hole to plug, we can let you know. But yeah, as Shannon said, we're just a part of PCI compliance.
Right. Does Untangle support QoS or some other type of traffic prioritization over OpenVPN?
Over OpenVPN, you could do a couple of things. So it would depend on your licensing, but OpenVPN is a service app within Untangle. So you see it's basically listed under my service apps here. So QoS with Untangle lives under Config Network Advanced. So for one, yes, we do offer quality of service. It's listed right here. You see it enabled. The important thing to remember about our quality of service is it will only apply to bypassed traffic. So if you need to bypass the devices connected to OpenVPN, we could set up some QoS rules here. So we have built-in rules for VoIP, as you see. What we would have to do first would be create a bypass rule matching the type of traffic you want to use for QoS, because that's how we isolate that traffic to layer 3 where QoS can shape it. You see I have a rule built in right here to not filter a local printer. That's coming off my licensing now. So that's an interesting thing too. If you have one license for something like web filter, if you have to bypass OpenVPN users, then they come off of that web filter license as well. So that's an interesting aspect to Untangle when we start talking about quality of service, because all of those devices that we're shaping aren't being counted on your license. If they were not bypassed, we would have to use the bandwidth control app to shape that traffic. But we could bypass it and then use quality of service. But just keep in mind, as kind of a pro tip, QoS at Untangle only applies to traffic that sits in a bypass rule.
Okay. Can Untangle be configured on 2 different servers that both have the VPN server option enabled in order to provide redundancy and load balancing for clients? If so, what would determine which server the clients should choose?
That's a great question. Please, somebody who's, yeah,
John,
if anyone.
John has an answer for it. Overlapping networks are not allowed in OpenVPN. OpenVPN will not go down unless the WAN connection goes down. So that's
what I wanted to say. Yeah, if the WAN that they're coming in on goes down and you have multiple WANs and Untangle's WAN failover set up, that kind of stuff, that's the only way we can failover and bounce them to another connection like that. So yeah, thank you, John. That's our director of QA. Good answer. So that's what that would require. Yeah, you would need multiple WANs. We'd have to have that failover balancing set up too. And those are both paid subscriptions.
Great. All right, I think that seems to be
Good questions. All right.
Yeah, lots of questions coming in. Can a site-to-site open VPN connection handle just VoIP traffic and ports?
I would say probably no on that, because we're looking to actually connect with a client. So it would have to be, there's some kind of interaction that has to happen with a client connection. So a device like that, I don't think they could connect to the OpenVPN client and get through.
Okay, I think I'm sure some more are going to come in. So if you want to, but we can at least continue the slides.
Sure. I did want to mention, if you're looking at your OpenVPN and trying to troubleshoot it a little bit, some of the best tools are just the reports and the session viewer. So in your Untangle on your dashboard, you can always customize that dashboard to show OpenVPN widgets if you want to see logins or connection timeouts, that kind of stuff. The actual session viewer is a really handy tool as well. It's just on the dashboard, you go to sessions. I'll show you real quick here on mine. So I'm going to go click on dashboard, and then you see over here on sessions, that's going to show everything that's happening on my box. Depending on what you have installed, the information you have presented right here, you can see a ton of information. So if I'm only looking for a certain remote address, if I'm looking for a certain username, I can just jump into the sessions real quick, and I can just say, well, I just want to see that jsmith2. Okay, so he's not logged in. Good. So maybe I want to jump into a certain port, a certain address. You can just copy it and paste it into that filter box, and it'll narrow everything down. There's a really good breadth of information presented here by default. But as I showed, if there's something you don't see, come over columns right here. There's a ton more. That's a good one is creation time. I, of course, want to see when that session was created. So the dashboard is handy, obviously, because you can customize it to show the reporting you want. But the little session viewer and then just reporting and the event viewers here, you can just jump on and say, I want to see who's connected, who's timed out, who's dropped, top clients by usage, things like that. So the reports and the session viewer are really quick, handy tools for troubleshooting. If you do have more questions, obviously, like I said, contact our award-winning support team here in Colorado at support@untangle.com. If you have a complete subscription or a subscription to live support, pick up the phone and give us a shout. The knowledge base is also available, support.untangle.com. And as I said earlier, because this is OpenVPN, it's free, it's open source. Our forums at forums.untangle.com are an amazing resource for OpenVPN tips and tricks and things like that. And then also the YouTube channel. And I'm going to let Shannon wrap up on the rest.
Right. I know we have a few more questions coming in, so I'm letting our team on the back end help answer those questions. But if you are completely lost in this, whether it be this app or in general the entire Untangle suite or other applications or configurations, we do have professional services available along with all the other options that Chad mentioned. Whether it be you're wanting to upgrade to your new version, or you want to really change your configuration settings, or you're a new user and want to make sure you're setting it up correctly, we do offer professional services for various needs. So just keep that in mind if you just want to make sure and double check that everything's a-okay.
The one, I don't mean to interrupt, the one I mentioned is our system optimization service. The cool thing about that one is that you can buy one of those anytime you want. You can buy one a month if you want it, and it just gives you a support engineer for 2 hours to go through your complete configuration. So if you want to do it when you purchase Untangle, if you want to do it 6 months down the road, those are always available to you. That's all. Go ahead.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, I think most of the questions are getting answered. So just want to mention, as always, our promotions that we have available. These are promotions that are pretty much continually running year round. So whether most people already have Untangle, but if you're looking to upgrade, to a new appliance or a new package, we do offer some trade-in specials for that, as well as if you are a new user to Untangle or not yet, you're not sure, we do offer that trade-in too if you have a competitor's product. So we do offer some special pricing discounts for that. So please email us at sales@untangle.com if you want to learn more. And as always, I know a bunch of you use this at home, which we love, our home users, but if you do bring us to work, we do also have some special pricing for that too, just to we'd love to help protect your network at your work too. So please keep that in mind if in the future you want to use this at your work if you're using us at home right now. So I think that's about it. As always, we're here to chat with you, whether it be sales, support, on the forums. As Chad mentioned, we have a lot of resources available for you if you don't want to talk to someone. But if you do want to talk to someone, we are here to help. So please be sure to reach out. If we didn't get to your question, I do apologize. Some of them were very specific to their network configuration settings. So please email us at support@untangle.com. We'll be happy to answer those questions. All right, I think that's about it. So thanks, Chad, for the great demo, and we'll see you guys next time.